So today we're chatting with Adam Belinsky of Crescendo Bar Exam Prep. This is quite the guy. He had 4 kids at a young age, and he's obsessed with baseball. We were able to pull him away from his Little League coaching to chat with us today about bar exam prep. He doesn't have a dog, but his daughter is begging him for one. So I encourage you all, after you finish watching this.
Oh, man, you had to bring that up.
Yeah, after you finish watching it, everyone please just email Adam saying, why won't you get your daughter a dog already? She desperately needs one.
It's complicated with 4 kids. There's plenty of stuff to clean up already. And but yeah.
And you've got the baseball and you've got the bar exam prep, which is what we're here to talk about today. So tell me, how did the bar exam prep come about?
Yeah, so like many people that might be watching, I went to law school, or maybe you'll be going to law school soon. And during law school, there were some things that were a struggle for me. I really cannot sit at a computer or sit at a book for 10 to 12 hours a day. I need some more variety. It's just how my personality is. I felt like I was suffocating a little bit with how the beginning of my law school experience started out. And so I started to innovate using some of my background to create ways around my personal problems. And I used to be a TV reporter for a CBS affiliate, which was kind of fun and random. And then I also was in corporate training. So education's something I'm really passionate about. And I've spent a lot of my life doing recordings of different types. And so what I would do is I would record my notes and ultimately my outlines, which are just like the refined notes that you put together over the course of a semester. And I try to get every course down to under an hour of audio content, where I just rattle off the principles really quickly. And then I use those to go to the gym, to go hiking. Steve, you mentioned to me earlier that you love backpacking. And I love being out there in nature too. There's just something so amazing about being out there. And so to be able to take a substantial portion of what could have been a really stressful part of my studying out into the wilderness was a huge blessing and just a sanity saver. And so I spent a lot of time memorizing the principles that I needed for the final exams out hiking in the sticks. And that was awesome. And so Crescendo all came about because of my own personal experience. It turned out that I ended up doing pretty well in law school using this approach, and it helped me to even help out at home because I had 3 of my kids while I was in law school. And so to even be able to clean up, in the kitchen or watch the kids at a park while I'm listening to the audio was also a big win. And so it just helped me stay sane, juggle everything. And over the course of those 3 years in law school, I was able to refine how I did the audio, how I approached it, and had little ahas along the way because I was using it for myself. And I had some friends that would approach me and say, hey, can I get your audio? And I'd be like, yeah, sure, what the heck. So my very sloppy, trashy audio outlines were just being passed all around the law school. And that was kind of fun and also terrifying, because when you're just making it for yourself, you're not double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking, and having experts vet everything like the content we have now. But it was something, and it was semi-decent, and it worked for me. And so that was how Crescendo all kind of came about. I had the sloppy embryo for myself. It worked out. Other people wanted it. And I said, hey, maybe I should do more with this.
Wow, that's really cool. So you kind of created your own study materials, but it wasn't just your typical handwritten chicken scratch notes. This was audio that you recorded yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I would try to distill, something you get as you're doing TV reporting is this skill of distilling complicated things, a lot of information into just very small, minute and a half stories, right? And you don't do exactly the same thing when you're outlining, but it's very similar to the process. And so I was taking my notes, trying to figure out what really, really mattered, and then recording that and listening to it over and over again. And I didn't just record an hour straight of those hour-long outlines. I would break them up into little repeatable, digestible chunks. And so I'd listen to that one chunk just on repeat over and over again. And so something I tell all students, current or future students, regardless of whether or not they end up looking into Crescendo or using our resources, I strongly recommend recording your own notes in some way, creating your own audio outlines if you have the time. It took a lot of time to put those together initially. And again, they were sloppy. There's some downsides to it. But if you do have the time, it's really helpful. And so if you're pinching pennies and you can't afford Crescendo, then making your own audio outlines could be a really good way to go. And so there's that.
No, that's really cool. I love the idea, and I imagine that it's worth students at least trying this to kind of articulate it for themselves. But then if they want the quadruple checked version, Crescendo has that to offer. And you've been doing at this for quite a while, and I heard that these methods worked quite well for you in the end personally. You graduated summa cum laude from a top 40 school. You scored in the top 5%, conservatively speaking, on the UBE.
Yeah, that's right. And so I use the same kind of audio outline approach throughout all my finals. And then also when it came to bar prep time, I made my own audio outlines there and I used those. And that's really when I discovered that there could be a viable market for this and there could be a need beyond just meeting my own personal needs. Because I had a classmate that approached me who was using a more conventional, traditional bar prep program that he spent lots of money on. And he was like, man, I don't know what I would give to be able to take your audio outlines that you have for the bar prep stuff and just go golfing today. Like, I just want to golf all day without feeling guilty at all. But instead, I am going to be in this library. And he's like, I'll give you $50 an audio outline, which is more than what we charge now. But it was just so funny and he was really trying, like, sincerely to get me to sell this to him. But at the time, it just didn't feel like something that I could appropriately do because I'd leveraged some other bar prep materials and I hadn't, it was just for my personal use. Right. And so I had some copyright concerns about doing anything commercial because I was just looking out for myself in that particular instance. But I made note, maybe sometime down the road, I can create something that doesn't have any of those copyright type issues. That's not just for my personal use. And then we can sell it to anyone everywhere. And so, it wasn't until a couple of years later that I really got into building Crescendo. I practiced law. I went down in American Samoa as an assistant AG in their civil division there, which was really fun and eye-opening. And was blessed with some other great attorney-like experiences. But in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, how can I get Crescendo going? What can I do to make this work out? And so I was studying about different memorization techniques. You know, I mentioned that over my law school experience, I refined how I did the audio, but I felt like there could be more out there, more tools that I could utilize that I hadn't utilized for myself. Because one of the drawbacks of using any kind of commercial product is that you don't have the benefit of having created it, right? If you create an audio outline for yourself, it's going to be way more memorable, and you're gonna understand it way better because you know what went into that outline, and you also know what you left out, and that's just all there. And so there's this challenge when you're making a commercial product that you want to be highly memorable and engaging, of trying to get over that hurdle of non-creation. And so if I'm giving this product to someone who did not write it, how can I make sure that they're still going to benefit from it as much as I benefited from my own? And so I looked into different mnemonics or memory tools. You might be familiar with mnemonics or maybe use that in your LSAT prep stuff. I don't know if you use any mnemonics in that aspect, but different memory tools, you know, some of them are acronym based. And so you've got a bunch of different letters and each letter stands for a principle, right? Those are the most familiar mnemonics people generally are aware of. And then you've got some phrase type mnemonics where each part of a phrase represents a principle. And then you have some really cool mnemonics that I spent a fair amount of time researching, and those are memory palaces, or I don't know if you've heard of the method of Loci.
Yeah, I have. Fascinating.
And what I love about the method of Loci is you take the student on a journey where they're visualizing places and things, and your spatial memory is so powerful. You know, you could get a list on a paper of all the different things in the room around you and try to memorize that. Or you can open your eyes for 10 seconds and shut your eyes. And I guarantee you're going to know way more just from what you saw than from the words on a page. And so getting people to imagine places and things and then linking those back to the concepts were things that was a goal that we had with Crescendo. And that wasn't something that I had in my own personal outlines. I certainly didn't have the time to do that for myself. Because some of our mnemonics, they might seem simple, but we've spent hours and hours just trying to refine one mnemonic and asking ourselves, is that the most effective way to memorize this? And, you know, we're constantly refining them and reviewing them and trying to upgrade our mnemonics and add new mnemonics. But we're very passionate about trying to make Crescendo as memorable as it can possibly be, so that if people haven't created it, they are experiencing it in such an engaging way as they listen that they're almost kind of creating it in their imagination as they listen. And so
that is super cool. I love everything about this. I've come across the memory palace concept before, method of loci. It's really cool stuff. And the fact that this is an audio program and you don't have to be locked up in the library.
Right.
I think so many law students and those studying for the bar, they're just trapped with their books. And we have audio now. You can liberate. Right. You have phones where you can liberate yourselves from being indoors and enjoy the weather.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, there are some other audio-based programs out there. Audio Learn, Audio Outlines, they've started creating some audio outlines. They actually beat us to the market, and I stumbled across them before I created Crescendo, but their outlines are more long-winded. So to cover one subject, it takes 3, 4, 5 hours. Whereas with us, we just focus on the really, really critical stuff and hitting it in such a way that you can listen to it over and over again. And so every subject's an hour roughly, or even less, which is kind of crazy when you think about, you know, you could have a 4-credit evidence class that you suffer through all semester. And then what you really need to know for that exam, or at least 85, 90% of it, you know, we can distill into 1 hour. It's kind of crazy to think about, but that's what we try to do for students. And so, yeah, I'm excited about it. And I've been really excited and encouraged by how it's helped students. Not everyone is an auditory learner. And so we do have visual components. And actually we even encourage our auditory learners to read along as they listen the first time, just so that they can make sure they're understanding everything correctly, right? You don't want to mishear something and then mishear it over and over and over again. It helps to just have that audit in place where you're reading along and listening and like, okay, cool. Totally caught that there was a not in there. And it wasn't a positive, right? And then, and also there's some pictures, and just the structuring of the outline itself on the page can be helpful to think through in terms of chunking and just keeping things in the right buckets in your brain is what I like to say. And so that's a little bit more about the product and stuff, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions you have about Crescendo or me or just law school in general.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'm curious because you talked a lot about memorization as being one of the components of Crescendo. And I always think that, and I haven't gone to law school or taken the bar, so I don't know, you know better than me, but what else is involved in law school prep or bar exam prep aside from memorization?
Oh, yeah. So writing is a big component of the bar exam. About half of your bar exam experience is writing. There's a performance test aspect, and then there's 6 essays. So you have 2 performance tests if you're taking the UBE. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. So there's uniform bar exam, which has now been adopted in 30 plus states and counting. Texas was the most recent add. Ohio recently added. And the trend is very positive toward more and more states adopting the uniform bar exam. But there are still some states like California where they do things their own way. And so what I'm saying is describing the uniform bar exam experience. That said, almost every jurisdiction, even California, uses the multiple choice portion of the uniform bar exam called the MBE, or the multi-state bar exam, which covers 7 key topics. And so what I'm saying, what I'll tell you about the multiple choice applies to virtually everybody, with the exception of a few little places like Louisiana, for whatever reason. They are special. Don't hold it against them. There's nothing wrong with Louisiana. But in terms of how they administer the bar exam, they are special in that sense. And so, yeah, you've got these portions of the bar exam. There's the multiple choice, and certainly, you know, if you've performed well in multiple choice tests in the past, those skills will carry over, you know, with the LSAT experience in how you read questions, those same types of tips and tricks that you have, you know, taken to heart to do well in the LSAT. Those help students on the multiple choice portion of the bar exam. But then just being able to write quickly, think quickly, and put out essays that are easy to follow. There's different formulas you can use to do well on those. We encourage students to use something we call UROC. There's two other more traditional methods that are very similar called CRAC and IRAC, which you may have heard of before. IRAC stands for Issue, Rule, Application, Conclusion. CRAC is basically the same thing, except for instead of your issue being framed as an issue or a question, it's your conclusion, rule, application, conclusion. And so the UROC method is a little bit different. It's got a more positive vibe to it. So just like, it just sounds more fun. You rock, right? Who doesn't want to like feel good, you know, and think that they actually rock? But the U stands for upgraded issue statement. And so we give some advice about how you go about upgrading issue statement, because that is the very first thing a grader reads. And they're making judgments of you based on your first sentence, right? And so you want to make sure that you hit the ground running and you've got your best foot forward. And so we give advice about how you upgrade your issue statement so it stands out and they go, wow, this student like knows what they're talking about, and I know just based on reading one sentence. And so so we give some tips about upgrading issue statements, and then you've got your general rule, just like the CRAC R or the IRAC R, the UROC R is essentially the same. And then our O in the UROC method focuses on the facts, operating on the facts like a surgeon. And we use the surgeon just as a metaphor because it helps you remember a few different parts of how you operate on the facts. There's certain things a surgeon would never do. They'd never leave behind foreign objects. And so don't just like create facts that aren't there, right? You don't want to leave the sponge in the dude's body that's, you know, going to lead to this crazy malpractice suit. And then you want to be very precise when you're in that part of the experience. You're not using a hammer, you're using a scalpel to look at, you know, the very fine details of the fact pattern that other students might be overlooking. And so the O is your application essentially, except for it's reminding you that you're operating on the facts like the surgeon. And I mentioned two of those parts of the operation, but there are more. And then finally you've got your conclusion. And so there's just a few adaptations to the traditional model that we give students to make their essays stand out. And then you have your performance test aspect of the exam, where basically you don't need to memorize anything for it. It's just you have to take a huge input of data and then understand it, synthesize it, use it to meet a client's need, hypothetical need, in some written form, so a memo, or maybe you're writing a letter or you're writing a brief. And so those kind of things take practice. And so Crescendo not only does the memorization aspect, but we have practice exams, and we actually license our practice content from the NCBE, which is the company that actually creates and administers uniform bar exams. So we're using past essay questions, past performance test questions, past MBE questions, all the ones that they've made available to any other commercial company. And so we think it's important for students to drink from the source, you know, and to get stuff from the company that's creating the uniform bar exam. And what's nice about that too is you're given the point sheets that the actual graders are using to assess the essays and the performance tests. And so we don't provide manual, you know, attorney grading, which it's questionable how helpful it is, because it's not going to be your same subjective grader on the actual exam. But we do give people the actual point sheets, and so they can compare their answers to the point sheets, see, did I cover the bases, did I understand it, did I organize it in a way similar to the point sheets, and can self-assess. And so that's a little bit about the other aspects of the bar exam that are not memorization. But I mean, on the bar exam, you do have to memorize a freakish amount of content, way more than you memorize for any given closed book final. You have essentially 12 full semester type courses worth of content that you've got to memorize. And so you can start out thinking, I got this, this isn't a problem, I don't need memory hacks, and just read and read and read to no end and practice, and that can work. But it can also become incredibly overwhelming. And so we've actually not been going at this for a long time. Last May was actually when we launched with our full-on bar prep course, and which is really late to the game for the July bar. Most people have already bought their bar prep courses, but we had a fair amount of students that were using other bar prep material and got about a month in June, and were just overwhelmed and frustrated and just felt at a loss of how to keep everything straight. And so then they stumbled across our stuff and felt it more manageable. And so, there's a ton to memorize, but not all of it's memorization. But for the bar exam, our material is really, I think, helpful for it. It's way different than the LSAT, where you don't have to memorize anything. It's just skills, processing power, CPU in your brain. But yeah. Good question.
Funny. Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, it's funny. I was.
Feel free to interrupt me.
I'm learning a lot here. I'm learning a lot here, because I haven't done this before. But as I'm listening, I'm thinking, wow, like the bar exam is both similar and different from what I do with LSAT prep for LSAT Unplugged, the YouTube and the podcast and all that. What's going on with the bar exam is that on the one hand, you do have all the memorization, and that's why the mnemonics are useful. But then another thing you said stood out to me when you were talking about UROC and kind of breaking it down, where you have to focus on what's actually written there, not what you might think is
That's
written
right.
there.
Yeah. So
I'm like thinking of our other conversation.
We got to have a critical eye.
Yeah. Think back to our old conversation about, like the reasoning.
Question. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. In terms of the memorization, you mentioned the mnemonics again. We also offer some other stuff that's a little bit different than what you get anywhere else. As far as I'm aware, there's no other company that offers audio flashcards like we do. And so what we do, you listen to this audio where it pauses long enough for you to think through or verbalize your answer. And basically you can think of it as like a buddy in the car sitting beside you, quizzing you. Right. And obviously the time you need to answer that question is going to vary from person to person, but we've tried to strike a pretty good balance to be where most people would be. And so we give about a time and a half of what it would actually take for someone to just spout out the answer. And so we've gotten great feedback about that. And we've refined that over time, because initially we just had these summary MP3s that would just rattle off the real key stuff very quickly. And then we had some students give us some feedback and say, hey, what if you made them into like questions? And like we had a chance to engage with it, and we're like, that's golden. And so so many of the things that are awesome about Crescendo have come from our early users and just giving feedback. We never had audio flashcards at the very beginning, and we never had visual flashcards either. And those came about because we had some students say, I like the audio flashcards, but like there's times when I can't put my headphones in, but I can just look down at my phone and tune out what's going on around me. And I'd love to be able to look at some visual flashcards. And so we ended up hiring an artist and getting some pictures to go with our mnemonics and working those into visual flashcards. And so the way Crescendo is right now is not how it will be even next year. And so I'm really excited about some of the things that are coming down the pipe, the different feedback we've been getting from students, both the good and the constructive, and trying to work that all together, because we're just constantly trying to reevaluate what works, what doesn't work, and improve the product.
Well, dude, I love the idea of these audio flashcards. I'm sure you've come across Pimsleur.
I actually have not personally come across, and that might just show
so it's
competency gap.
So Pimsleur is like language learning. So it's this audio program where they teach you foreign languages.
Great.
And they give you a moment to like give your own answer before they tell you the answer. So
very cool.
With like the spaced repetition thing. So I'm thinking anyone who's in that would probably like your stuff too.
Yeah, and I would imagine it's a matter of time before other companies start picking up on this type of thing, because it is so useful and so liberating. And you not only get the benefit of just getting out of the library, but there is something to getting your blood pumping and doing something mechanically that can help cement things into your memory. Going on a hike, getting your heart rate up, breathing deeply, getting more oxygen as you're studying. There's just so many benefits to having that type of freedom. And so I imagine it's just a matter of time before people start picking up on what we're doing. And so I appreciate you talking with us so we can help kind of spread the word of, look, we started this whole revolution that might be coming. But
no, it's awesome. And it sounds to me like it is a revolution because it's, again, like I said, it's liberating you from the library. So Crescendo, I'm guessing it's available on the computer, of course, but it's also, people can get it on their phones too, right?
Yeah, well, so right now you can get it on the computer, on your phone, if you're connected to the internet. And we give people PDFs and zip files for offline access, but that's kind of clunky. Not everyone knows how to deal with zip files and putting them on their phone. We try to give people step-by-steps, but it's not the best way. And so we currently have Android and iOS apps under development that we're hoping to have released in the next month or two to help people on the July bar, where people will be able to access all the content, practice questions offline on their mobile device, which I think will be a huge step forward. But as a new company, as a very small company, as a company that does not charge a lot for our material compared to other bar prep companies, it's a massive accomplishment to be on the cusp of our Android and iOS apps. And so I'm super stoked about that. But yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to get the material. Sometimes people just download the PDFs and print those out and have them with them to study. They like the paper, like to be able to mark it up. And we totally encourage people to mark it up too, because if in the best of worlds, we actually prefer if students get our stuff as 1Ls, because, and that might seem like, whoa, that's way too early. Like, I don't want to think about bar prep. It's just going to stress me out. But ask any student who's gone through law school and done really well in law school, and they'll say, I wish I did bar prep more during law school because of the dividends that it pays. And you'll find with some of the people that have done really well, they've incorporated bar prep materials into their normal studies. And so, obviously every professor's got their own hobby keys, the nuances that they focus on, and we have no way of knowing those. You'd be surprised how much professor to professor has in common, when they're teaching contracts law or torts or property law. But there are some nuances, right? And so you can't just rely as a student going into a final exclusively on our stuff. But if you use our stuff early on in the semester to get a really solid foundation of the nuts and bolts of a particular course, then the rest of that semester, you can just listen and zero in on, okay, what does my professor really care about outside of those nuts and bolts? And I'm going to just listen and hang on, all those little nuances, like, oh, I don't remember that being in that line. I'm going to make a note of that because that's something he's got to care about, because it's not just a standard principle that comes up on the bar. And so we believe that, Crescendo can make you a more effective case reader and in-class listener, because you're out of the gate beginning the semester with a really solid foundation. And we have people that will find our stuff the week or the day before finals and try to cram with it. And they have different degrees of success with that method. But we really think if students want to excel, get it early, get it as a 1L, use it early on in the semester, and then build on the foundation that Crescendo gives you, and then just crush it with that particular professor's points of interest. And so one thing, and that really makes us different from other bar prep courses, you get immediate and you get lifelong access to all our stuff. So if you buy it as a 1L, you can have it for years and years. You can take the bar how many times you want, whatever, it's there for you. And that includes the practice questions. And so you can actually take past bar essays and multiple choice questions related to torts as a 1L as you're gearing up for your finals, rather than just haphazardly stumbling across, different exams online. And certainly if your professor has an exam that they've made public, you want to look at those, and those are the holy grail. But using what's put out by the NCBE is a really good second best to those professor-specific prior exams. So, man, you got me monologuing again.
Dude, it's great. It makes a lot of sense to me. You get this stuff now as a 1L, then it helps you throughout law school, and you're layering your understanding so that when the bar exam comes 3 years down the line, you've already been studying for the entire 3 years. You're ready to go.
Yeah, that's where we're hoping. You know, the mnemonics will be old friends and be like not as overwhelming, because if you're trying to memorize hundreds of mnemonics over the course of a couple weeks, it's going to be really stressful. That type of metadata will just overwhelm you. But if you space it out, you know, you eat the elephant one nibble at a time each semester, then I mean, you're really going to just destroy the bar in terms of managing your stress and, you know, and getting the content that you need memorized. And so, yeah, we're really excited to see how students have been doing with it and how they're using it. And then again, like I said, just their feedback to help us improve it. And so Crescendo might be pretty darn good right now, but I really believe in a year it's going to be even that much better. So.
Dude, I love it. So what's the best way for students who are interested to find out more, to reach out? And you've got a very active YouTube channel too.
Yeah, so we've got our YouTube channel. You can check that out. And we have some tips and tricks about each portion of the bar exam that are just there free for any student to benefit from. I don't know if you've seen whiteboard videos before. They're pretty engaging, pretty fun. And so we put some of those together that you can look at and just get a feel for the overall bar exam and just some basic tips and tricks. And then if you're interested in using some of our audio outlines and our written outlines, just go to our website, crescendo.net. And you can look there. We have, you know, promotions that come and go from time to time. But if you email us at support@crescendo.net and you say, hey, you know, I saw this podcast, I heard this podcast, or I watched this, you know, YouTube interview with Steve Schwartz, and you mentioned that we could maybe get a promotion if we mentioned it, just email, mention that you saw this, and we'll get you the best current discount code that's available. And so rather than just giving a discount code and putting it out to the ether and then having it go inactive down the road and then confusion, just email support@crescendo.net or sales@crescendo.net. Either of those would work. And so we can cut you a deal depending on the timing of when you ask. We might even be able to give you one of our subjects for free. So torts or common law or criminal law. And so you can, you know, bite into it without any big risks. But regardless, we do offer a 30-day money-back guarantee with like no questions, no hassles. We, you know, as much as I think our product's awesome, I think our customer service is just like killer, because we want students to succeed. We don't care about making every extra dollar we can possibly make. We want students to be happy. And so if for whatever reason you think, oh, Crescendo is just not for me, you have buyer's remorse, you don't even have to give us an explanation, though we love it if you do, because there might be some things that we can take to use to bless other students down the road. But so there is that benefit, because, you know, we recognize we're asking students to do something pretty radical. They're at the end of their educational journey. They've been studying one way their whole life, likely, and Crescendo is not that way, because Crescendo just popped up. And so to ask someone to try something so different towards the end when so much is on the line, you got to be a little bit crazy, you know, a little bit, just like gutsy. And there's not a lot of early adopters that have that. And so to just mitigate that risk, because attorneys are all about mitigating risk, we say, look, just try risk-free 30 days and just see if it really is something that might work for you. And if not, or you don't feel like you're ready to go on with it, then no harm, no foul. It's all good. And so we'll restore you to wherever you were before, and we'll move on. So
awesome.
Thankfully, we don't get a lot of those requests.
Yeah, sure.
Otherwise we would not be in business. But yeah.
Awesome. And thank you again, Adam, for taking the time to share your advice
Steve.
on bar exam prep and Crescendo with everybody. I'll include links to everything in the description for this episode.
Oh, that would be super awesome. Thank you.
All right, be well.